Hello and welcome back to our third Camtasia video lecture dealing with chapter 10, which is looking at standard cost variance. So in this video we're going to see how to compute direct labor rate and direct labor efficiency variance. Again, this is going to be the same exact thing that we looked at for materials. Okay, we're just going to use some different names, that's it, but we're still basically doing the same thing, right? We're still looking at these equations, right? But we're just going to change the abbreviations, okay? And we're just looking at different names. So let's just jump right in with an example. That's probably the best way to kind of figure this stuff out. So now we're looking at labor variance, okay? Glacier Peak Outfitters, they have the following direct labor standards for its mountain parka, right? So they should use, to make one parka, 1.2 standard hours. And the standard rate that they should pay their employees is $10 per hour. They tell us that last month the employees actually worked 2,500 hours and the total labor cost was $26,250. They made 2,000 parkas, okay? So we have to figure out, is there a rate variance or is there an efficiency variance? Another way to look at it, if you don't like the words rate and efficiency, is there a price variance on what we paid our workers? Is there a quantity variance on the amount of hours that we gave those direct labor people? Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to calculate actual hours at actual rate. Okay, if this throws you off, it's the same thing as AQ times SP, right? We're just using different words. Instead of dealing with the quantity of material, we're dealing with hours. Instead of dealing with a price that we pay, we're dealing with the rate that we pay them. Okay, so they told us in the example, or in the previous slide, that, oh, by the way, the total cost we spent on direct labor was $26,250. Okay, we know we used 2,500 hours for our direct labor. Okay, if I divide, I can figure out what the actual rate per hour was, $10.50. We then look at equation 2, right? I'll put the 2 right there. Actual hours at the standard rate. Again, this is the same thing we did in the last video. We're using the actual quantity times the standard price. I'm sorry. That should be actual quantity at actual price and actual quantity at standard price. Okay, we're using different names. Instead of saying the actual quantity of material bought, hey, the actual hours we incurred. Same thing, just different name. You might not like standard rate, excuse me. Standard price just makes more sense in your mind. I get that. It does in my mind as well. Well, standard rate, what's the rate we're paying these people? Well, the problem told us, hey, on average, the standard should be $10 an hour. Based on the actual hours incurred, we get $25,000. So right off the bat, we could see, based on the actual hours incurred, we had a price variance or a rate variance. We should have paid $25,000. We actually paid $26,200. So the difference between these two is our rate variance, which is $12.50. So we are now unfavorable. Okay, no problem. Let's look at the standard hours at the standard rate. Well, this $10 was given to us in the problem, right? They did not tell us how many hours we should use, right? What is the standard hours that we used? Well, we know we made 2,000 parkas, and we know each of those parkas should take 1.2 hours. That means the standard hours that we should have used for the month is 2,400 hours, okay? Times the standard rate, which is $10, they gave us that. We end up with 24,000. That's what we should have paid. Or I'm sorry, that's what we should have used. $24,000 worth of hours, okay? Notice we're holding the standard rate equal so that way we can judge the production manager's performance, because the only thing that's different are the hours that were used, okay? So we see that we're basically inefficient, right? We actually used more than we should have, so the efficiency variance is $1,000 unfavorable, okay? If we compare these two, we could say that the spending variance is $2,250 unfavorable, okay? Just took it an extra step there that we really didn't need to. Again, they explain how we got the 2,400 hours. I already described that to you or explained that to you. Remember, we're taking the actual output at the actual amount that should be used. Well, we should use 1.2 hours. We made 2,000 parkas. We should use 2,400 hours for the month. Okay. Same thing with the actual rate per unit. We just divided. Okay. And again, we divided that actual cost they gave us by the actual hours incurred. That's how we got the 1050. Okay. Now, LRV. The hell's LRV? We just looked at MPV and MQV. It's the same thing, right? Same exact thing. We're just using different abbreviations, right? So the labor rate variance, again, is the difference between the actual hours at the actual rate and the actual hours at the standard rate. Again, we can factor here. What are we holding constant? The actual hours. So to figure out the labor rate variance, we take the actual hours or the actual quantity that we incurred and we multiply it by the difference in the rate or the difference in the price. Same thing. Actual rate minus standard rate times the actual hours shows us that we were unfavorable 1250. Same thing with the labor efficiency variance. Same exact thing. Okay? We could take the actual hours at the standard rate and subtract out the standard hours at the standard rate. Well, again, standard rate is the same in both of those mathematical phrases, right? The only thing that differs is the hours, the actual hours versus the standard hours. So we multiply the standard rate by the difference in the hours, we end up with $1,000 unfavorable, okay? If I were you, what I would do is I would kind of jot this down and just kind of study over it, memorize it a little bit. I would do the same thing with the materials variance, which is this one right here. I would jot this stuff down if I were you. Okay. So that's how we do the labor rate or the labor variance. Okay. So who's responsible for the labor variances? Well, it's usually the production manager, right? Because the production manager is in charge of the labor variances, because that person really influences all those factors, right? If we pay too much or if we use too much hours, why? Well, It could be a lot of things, a lot of reasons, right? There's mixed skills of, or there's a mix of skill level with the workers, right? So that could explain the labor rate variance, right? You were supposed to pay $10, you paid 10.50. Why? Well, we used a couple, we used some skilled people to do this maybe menial task, okay? Employee motivation, right? Why did you have a labor efficiency variance unfavorable? Well, employees aren't motivated, they don't want to work, okay? Supervision, or the quality of the production supervisor, obviously does impact all of these things, right? The level of motivation, hopefully they can motivate their employees. They could use lower paid laborers to do menial tasks, and the skilled workers have them do more skilled things. It could be a training issue, right? Why is your labor efficiency variance very unfavorable? Well, the employees aren't trained well, right? They just keep messing up, and we have to rework products and things like that. So again, when we're talking about labor rate variance, the main takeaway really is that the production manager is responsible for these, and there's a number of elements that go into managing that labor rate variance. Okay. How can we control the labor variance, right? Well, again, it's not going to be always controllable by one person or by one department, right? The maintenance manager, right? Maybe they do a poor job of maintaining the equipment, and our workers aren't working because they're sitting around waiting for the maintenance department to come around and fix a machine, right? The purchasing manager, maybe that purchasing manager bought a lower quality of raw materials. Okay, so we're going to have a labor efficiency variance. We're using more hours because these workers have a crappy input, so they got to rework some of the products that we're making. Okay. So let's just do a quick check here, right? Still dealing with Hansen Incorporated. Again, still haven't figured out what a Zippy is. Regardless, it's so funny. Regardless of the versions of the books we use, because I know a couple years ago I used a different version, and the same slide was there, Zippy. It's hysterical. I have no idea what it is. Anyways, so we're making a Zippy. We have the standard hours and we have the standard rate. Perfect. They tell us, hey, here's the actual hours you worked or that you incurred, 1,550. Here's the actual cost, 18,910, and you made 1,000 Zippies. Okay, we can go ahead and figure out what our labor rate variance is and what our labor efficiency variance is. Okay, so the labor rate variance for the week, what was it? Oh, sorry. Were we favorable or were we unfavorable? Well, remember, to calculate labor rate variance, what equation do we need? We need the actual hours multiplied by the actual rate minus the standard rate. Okay. Well, if we look back, we know that the actual hours were 1,550. We know the actual rate that they told us in the problem was $12. Minus 12 bucks. Okay. Well, what's the actual rate? Well, we kind of got to calculate that out, right? We know what the total cost was. We take that total cost and divide it by the actual hours, which ends up being $12.20. Okay? And we see here that we actually have an unfavorable advantage or unfavorable variance of $310. And there's the calculation right there. Okay, and again, how did they get this? Well, they took the total cost. I think it was what, 18,000, 18,910. And they divided it by the 1550. Okay. The labor efficiency variance. Again, we can do the same thing. The takeaway here is just knowing, what equation do I have to use? Well, to figure out the labor efficiency variance, it's going to be the standard rate at the, or multiplied by the difference between the actual hours incurred minus the standard hours. Okay, and we know how to get the standard hours. We take the actual output, which is 1,000 zippies, and multiply that by the standard that should have been used, standard hours, which is 1.5. Right? So the standard rate, which we already know to be $12 per hour, $12 times the difference in the actual hours versus the standard hours. So the actual hours were 1550. Standard hours should have been, based on 1,000 zippies times 1.5 hours to make one, is 1,500. So we have a difference, 50 times 12, which gives us 600. So are we favorable or unfavorable? Is it C or D? Well, we know that the actual hours are higher than what the standard hours should have been. We are unfavorable, so the answer is actually C. And there's the calculation. Okay? And again, here it is in chart form, I guess you could say. For variable manufacturing overhead, guess what? I'm just going to kind of zip through this one pretty quickly, because here's what you need to know. To figure out what the variable manufacturing overhead rate variance is, you do the same exact thing as you did for direct labor, right? The actual hours times the difference between the actual rate and the standard rate. To figure out the variable manufacturing efficiency variance, you hold the standard rate constant and you multiply that by the difference between the actual hours and the standard hours. Okay, and we'll work through an example in this as well. I don't want to go through it again, and again, the reason why is because you can go back and watch what we did for direct labor, and the same exact thing applies, same exact thing. Okay, but we will work through an example in the demo video. Okay, so in a nutshell, that is the standard cost variance and how you calculate it. Remember, it's made up of price and quantity variances. When we come back in our fourth video, I believe, we're going to do the demo problems that are in your study guide. So please tune back in for that one.